This video today is about 3 simple wire antennas. I'm setting these antennas up in my backyard antenna test range to get ready for field day. I set them up, I tune them in the backyard, and then I go set them up in the field and don't worry about any additional tuning. Now, they're all supported by a single mast or a rope over a tree branch, or whatever you have available. Simple, but they give good performance, especially for portable work. So the next step is to set up the mast. I have stepping stones through the garden here, and then over here on this fence post I have these conduit clamps, and I can just set the mast in there to hold it into place, and then I just put the bolt through and put a wing nut on the end to hold it in place. That's not the best permanent solution, but in this case I take the mast down when I'm not using it, and it works quite well. The next step is important. I need to add a halyard. The halyard is what allows me to raise the antenna without taking the mast down, rather like a flagpole. And so in this case I have a jam cleat. It's called a speed cinch here mounted on the fence. And if I put the halyard through it, then it's easy, just by pulling up like that, I can lock it in any position. And this clip on top of the mast then serves as a pulley. And I tie the rope into an endless loop so that I can't lose the end of it. And then I'm ready to start just raising the mast up. So I have a blue marker as the warning line saying I'm almost to the end, and then I have a red felt tip marker that says don't go past this point. That makes sure I maintain enough overlap at each end and don't accidentally pull the thing out, which is easy to do. And there we go, and that just sets the mast up. The first antenna we're going to look at today is a dipole, usually set up as an inverted V using a single center support and then just tying off the ends to whatever supports are available. This is actually my favorite portable antenna for a lot of situations. It's simple, it's cheap, it does the job. Now, a dipole is typically a monoband antenna, but with a bit of creativity you can extend it to other bands, or 2 or 3 bands at a time. You can use a link dipole. And what I usually do is set up dipole wires for multiple bands to the feed point, so I don't have to do any switching at the antenna when I want to change bands. I often set it up to work 4 or 5 bands at the same time.
Start with a center support like a mast. We'll also need some place to tie off the ends. Then we'll have the 2 dipole wires and some rope to tie off the ends. Then add a feed line and you're done.
Now, I'm going to use one of my portable dipole kits to build this antenna. And for backpacking, I often use very thin wire. And I keep each band, the dipole wires for each band, in its own little Ziploc bag to keep them clear. But for today, we're going to use a fatter wire because it shows up better on the video. So in this bag, I have 2 dipole wires for 20 meters. And each wire has on one end a loop for tying the support rope, and on the other end a loop to clip to the feed point, and a bare end. So I'm going to take the carabiner and clip that loop, and then take the wire and hook it under the wing nut. Come on, cooperate. Okay. Like that. And then do the other side. And there is the antenna feed point with the 2 wires and a little string to hang it by. Now, you notice the wires are still rolled up in their bundles. That's an important thing to keep from tangling. And I explain that later in one of my other videos and on the website of why I roll them in this figure 8 configuration. So now that we have the antenna made, we clip it to the halyard on the mast. And we'll untie the coax so that it can feed out as we raise the antenna. But before we raise this up too much higher, so now we have this and we have the wires, but if I raise this all the way to the top of the mast, these wires won't reach the ground. So this is the point at which I tie on the support ropes and run them to where I want them to go. So the bundles are easy to undo, and the wire just pulls right out of them. And then if I happen to have the right color support rope in my back pocket, it's rolled up the same way in a figure 8. And again, I can grab the center, toss that over there, and it'll pay out. So let me pull this up, find the ends. Of course, things are always getting tangled in the bushes here. I'm using a double sheet bend in this case. A slippery sheet bend is handy because it makes it faster to untie, but you can use whatever knot you like. Now, so we got one side, we'll get the other side out here, and then the fun part is actually running that wire, because this is not a simple antenna range to work with. So I can toss these bundles of rope onto the ground, and generally they pay out without tangling too much. We'll see how well it works today. Okay, so now I have the support ropes tied. While the antenna is at a convenient height, I'm going to stretch the support ropes out where they go. And then I'll come back and raise the antenna. So this is where we kind of head off down along the fence and dodge the plants. And let's kind of see what we can do. Now we have the other side, and this gets kind of interesting here. These bushes will get some very dramatic flowers on them, which I'm not allowed to break down once they're in bloom. And then I kind of work my way through the trees and bushes here.
As you can tell, this garden wasn't really made for setting up antennas.
Now that we have the antenna tied in place, we can use the halyard to raise it up to the height. Oh. There. Oh. There's always a few things that the cables and the wires can get stuck onto. Oh, and there we go. Now that we have this all the way up, now we go and tie off the ends. Okay, and so I have a hook in the corner of the fence to tie the rope to. I'll just kind of gently pull it up.
You get stuck again.
Yeah, I'm stuck again. Okay.
You're stuck on the...
I know, the iris. That's where it usually gets stuck. I just pull the rope up. I don't need a lot of tension on the antenna. It doesn't need to be super tight. And then I tie my usual taut line hitch that allows it to be adjusted. Okay, and then I can snug it up, and there we have the antenna in place.
Simple, right? This dipole antenna works great for field day or for any other portable use.
Now, we saw the simple dipole antenna with the two wires. I often carry a third wire in each kit to use as a ground plane vertical.
We use the same supports as the dipole. We have a vertical wire and two radial wires, plus a feed line and ropes to tie off the radials.
And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to unhook this wire, one wire, from one side of the antenna and hook it to the other, so that the two wires are now, the two dipole wires serve as the two ground plane radials. The ground plane antenna gives you vertical polarization, and sometimes that's what you'd prefer. Okay, so and then I'm just going to hook up the vertical wire in the same way to the other side of the antenna feed point. So now we have two radials and one vertical wire. Now, in theory, the vertical wire would be the same length as the two radials, but in practice it doesn't always work out that way, and that's why I carry a third wire. And then, once I have it all in position, I just raise the whole thing up, hoisting it by the vertical wire, and let's get up to about there. Well, a little bit higher maybe. Okay, that'll be good. And then I tie the radials at a sloping angle off the convenient support. Now, one nice thing about this fence is that I can just kind of pull this up and kind of tuck the rope in a slot there and pull it that way, and that should hold it well enough. And then go back and do the other side. And so we tie the other side off, and no, we'll just kind of pass it through here, I think, and just kind of, yeah, okay, and then there, that should work. And there we have a wire ground plane with two radials. Makes a quick and simple vertically polarized antenna, and it's reasonably efficient. It's got a good ground system and works quite well.
For a simple delta loop antenna, construction is basically the same as a dipole, with the ends of the wires connected across the bottom. The feed point can be at the top or at the center of the bottom wire. Both of these give horizontal polarization. For vertical polarization, the loop can be fed near the bottom of one sloping side. For example, see our vertically polarized delta loop video.
Now, there are many different loop shapes that we can use. And for the higher bands, like 15 meters or 10 meters, I like to use a delta loop with a point down.
We have a center support with some sort of spreader. The wire runs across the spreader and hangs down at the ends. Then the wires are connected to the feed point at the bottom. This delta loop is extremely similar to delta loops with the point up, which we covered in our last video. However, the triangle shape of the delta loop, one of its most recognizable features, is, well, flipped.
And so in this case, I have a top spreader made from an old tent pole, and it's actually a little longer than I need for this antenna. I have the center of the wire, the loop wire, taped here to the center, and then the ends are taped out there, but you can make them adjustable so that you can do it. You can change that as necessary for tuning. And so I'm going to go ahead and raise this antenna up. Oh, one other thing. In this case, I have an extra rope here tied to it. And the purpose of this rope, which I'd better undo before I raise the antenna too far, is I want the weight of the feed point to be on the halyard and not on the ends of the wires. because otherwise it makes the tent pole bend too much. So that will be to support the weight. And so I can raise this up. Come on, untangle. There you go. Okay. So I'm stepping something up here. Okay, there you go. So I can raise this up until I can reach the ends of the wires. So at the feed point, I have the two ends of the loop wire, and I'm just going to connect them to my center insulator. Now this loop is dimensioned so that it gives a good 50 ohm feed point impedance. That makes it narrower and taller, and also reduces the bandwidth. But oftentimes that's a suitable trade-off. So now that I have that, I can raise this up a little bit more, and okay, that hangs on that. Now I'm going to tie off the feed point so that the weight of the coax is on the string and not on the wires. And you can see that's what the feed point looks like.
Dale, forgot to connect the wire ends here. Sadly, even extremely experienced people forget some things sometimes.
The two wires for the loop and the string to hold the coax. And then I just pull it up into position. About there.
Pretty cool, right? I actually didn't know that you could do delta loops any other way until this video. Now, before we say goodbye, one of our, well, neighbors wanted to say hello.
Cloudy, are you there to visit? I'm sorry we don't have any carrots.
Cloudy!
I know. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Cloudy.
Yeah, I know. Yes, you're a good
Hi,
horse.
Cloudy.
Did you get enough of that?
Yeah, I love you, Cloudy. Thank you so much for watching today's video. We hope we taught you something new about portable antennas and their use in the field. If you want to see more like this video, subscribe to the Practical Antennas YouTube channel, like this video, and comment down below any ideas or suggestions for future videos. For more information, visit practicalantennas.com.